Hello, this is Casey from Top Form Design. Hold on. Hello. Alright, just stop so you have to. Okay. Hello. Now you're making me laugh. Okay. Hello, this is Casey from Top Form Design. We're gonna go over the install of the pivot for you to rotate your screen around. So this is the bike as you have it at home. Here's what you will be getting with your Top Form Design pivot kit. You'll have instructions, 3 washers, a lock nut, 13mm end wrench, a 6mm hex wrench, and an 8mm screw, cap screw. And then here is your pivot, assembled as this. So first, here is your Peloton screen. First off, we're gonna remove these clips in your clip for the data and power cord here. So you pull out and away, this way, to pull that clip loose, and then you'll pull your data and power cords out. Next, you'll remove these 2 clips here that block the access to the bolt, and those will pull straight out, such as that. Next, we'll remove this cap screw and lock nut to get your Peloton display off. There are 8 washers on here that will fall out as you remove this, so you'll want to catch those washers. It is helpful to have someone help you with this process. For as you're screwing out the bolt, this display wants to kind of just go wherever it wants to go, so it is helpful to have a extra set of hands. So I'm gonna remove, this is me by myself. I know how to do this. It's a little difficult by yourself, but you can. So I'm gonna grab the monitor like this. As you can see, the washers are falling out on the inside of that bracket. Here, I caught 2 of them. You wanna pull your display off. This is very important. Make sure you set your display on a nice soft surface, display side down, because you do not wanna scratch your screen. So when you pull your monitor hardware off, this is what you'll have. This is the actual hardware that should come with the Peloton. Now, I have seen some of these screws or some of these washers not be all on Peloton, so it's not totally necessary. The most important thing, when you install your pivot, you have at least 1 washer on the inside, 1 on both insides, and 1 on both outsides at minimum. Now, there is some gap in here, so that's why it's helpful to put more than 2 washers in here to take up some of that tolerance gap. But each Peloton here is different, so you have some tolerance variance in here, and you'll use washers to take up any of that tolerance variance. So to install the pivot, you want to go bolt, washer. This is a little tricky, but so what you'll do, this is kind of what I found that works best. Kind of set that in there like such. You have 2 washers on that side. You'll slide your pivot in facing this way. Kind of find that hole. Then it has those 2 washers captured in there. And now the other side, it's a little tight for 2 washers for me, so I'm just gonna go with 1 washer. A little tricky in here, you kind of gotta find that hole and slide it in using your fingernail or whatever works best for you. There we go, we've got 2 washers here, 1 washer here, and that will work just fine. Put another washer, on this side, and then your lock nut. And just snug this up for now. Doesn't have to be super tight. We'll do the adjustment after it's all installed. When you're all ready to, when you have your pivot on your actual display, you're ready to install it on your bike. You're gonna take the provided 8mm cap screw with a washer, slide your bracket over the display arm, and slide that bolt in. Just as such. Now be careful, it's going to be really flimsy. until you get that tight. I'm gonna rest it here for now. We'll take another one of the washers provided, slide her on there, and then your lock nut, and start tightening. You may have some gap in between here. You can put some washers in there. It's not totally necessary to have the washers in there. However, if you want to use this as another pivot point, you may want to put some washers in there, and I will touch on the pivot points after we are done with the install. So after you start to snug this up, it is very important to get this kind of aligned with the axis of the arm here. So you see how this is all in line with the axis? Because when you rotate your screen 90 degrees, it'll make your screen level with the ground, kind of like a picture frame hanging on the wall. If it's not level, you'll really notice it. And you may have to adjust that a little bit to get that level. Not a big deal. You can just snug it up right now, turn your screen 90 degrees if you want, and adjust that if necessary. I'm gonna snug her up. You want this fairly good unless you use this as a pivot point. It's fairly tight so it doesn't move on you. So we got our pivot there. We got a pivot here. So it's installed. Now we want to check the tightness of all the bolts. This is a little loose. When you're riding, it could kind of jiggle loose, so I'm going to tighten this up just a little bit. This is by preference. You may decide you like this tight, you may like it a little looser for your preference, so just play with the tightness of that bolt there. It's pretty snug right there. It's probably a little too snug. There we go, we got that. Now we're gonna install our data cables. And female data cable goes on the right, the male data cable on the left. And we're gonna, once the data cables are installed, reapply your clip. Just push it in, it'll snap in place. And we are going to, once you got this to the desired tightness, we'll reinstall our clips for just to make those head bolts not as visible. And we have it all together. Now, for functionality, you want to make sure your tightness is correct. Here we discussed, you can adjust that. Here, we have it snug coming from, as you can see here. However, you do want this a little snug because when you're really pedaling hard, this thing can have a tendency to move on you. So it's up to you on preference on tightness. Real easy to adjust. All you do is take your wrenches provided, use the open end down here in your hex wrench, and adjust accordingly. Now this is a tight lock nut, so it's gonna feel really tight, but just adjust it accordingly, and it won't take much to adjust it, maybe a quarter turn, and you can adjust that snugness. And it will have some wear in. There's a pivot here, there's a pivot point here, so it will wear in, so give it some time. However, if you want to loosen it up, just loosen those two bolts. And as far as maintenance throughout the throughout using it, you may have to adjust these bolts from time to time, but for the most part, once you have them tight, you'll be set to go, and it'll just be personal preference on how you want to adjust it. Any questions, feel free to contact Russ or myself, and we'd be happy to help you. Yeah, don't touch your face.